So again, welcome today. Thank you for joining us about this session, How the Water Budget Model Works. We do have partners. The Deep Creek Watershed Foundation is a partner with the Garrett County government, as well as the Property Owners Association on this project. So with that, we just wanted to reiterate that the water budget model is an opportunity for the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation and their partners to provide the data. So with that, we are going to transition to a recording, and I'm going to share that now. All right. So we want to thank you guys for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the water budget model, and we have Bob Hoffman here to tell us a little bit more.
Good day, folks. My name is Bob Hoffman. I have the privilege right now of being the president of the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. The little bit about the foundation, you can see up on the screen what our mission is. During and you'll see this in a moment too in a slide. During the roughly 2013 to 2015 time frame, quite a few Garrett County citizens, as well as members of the Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, and other folks, the county as well, of course, got together, and over a period of, I think it took us a couple of years, we created what is called the Watershed Management Plan. This is essentially a strategic plan for the care and feeding, if you will, of the Deep Creek Watershed and Deep Creek Lake. Some of you may know that Deep Creek Lake is almost 4,000 acres in surface. The watershed itself, the Deep Creek Watershed, is actually 41,000 acres. So it's really large. And as my good friend and associate Morgan Francis will say, anything that falls in the watershed is going to end up in the lake. So you get some idea of how it works, and it flows in from a basin, down into the middle of the donut. So after we completed the development of the watershed management plan, several of us got together and talked about how this was going to actually be implemented. Both MDE, Maryland Department of the Environment, and Department of Natural Resources from a state standpoint bought into it, the plan that is, and supporting it, as did Garrett County. Funding was kind of left up in the air as to how it was going to be funded. The plan is got 13 goals, multiple objectives and strategies under each goal. This was not something that Garrett County was going to be able to afford to do, and the state already spends money on Deep Creek Lake and some in the watershed as well. So when it was all said and done, a decision was made that we needed a source of private funding. And so one day, the individual who was the chairman of this steering committee that produced the watershed management plan, a gentleman by the name of David Myberg, who is currently an advisor to the foundation, he and I were talking, and he said, Bob, he said, private money. And he said, I think we're going to need a foundation. And I said, you're exactly right. We're going to need a foundation. Then I said, David, what's a foundation? I had no earthly idea what a foundation was. And so he educated me some. And then I surrounded myself with some very smart attorneys that also happened to be good advisors and women. And they got me on the straight and narrow as to how we could create what is now the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. And we started this in January of 2016, and surprisingly enough, by June of that same year, we had authority and permission, certification, whatever you want to call it, as a 501c3 charitable organization and permission from the Internal Revenue Service to begin to collect donations that we could then turn around and use to fund projects that would assist in the implementation of the watershed management plan. So that's basically how we started. And one of the first projects that we started with was the water budget model. Okay. And the initial water budget model was worked on in 2017, and it was worked on by an engineering firm called Century Engineering, which used to have and still does has an office here in Oakland, and they prepared for us based upon the information that we had at the time. They produced a water budget model, which in January of 2018, the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation provided to the state in the form of the Maryland Department of the Environment, and the Maryland Department of the Environment provided it to Brookfield Renewable Power, which is the company that owns and operates the dam, which includes the turbos and ensures that the rule bands are followed during the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how the first model came to be. Now, the first model was limited because we didn't have but one precipitation gauge in the lake, and we didn't have good information on outflow. So we, in the last 5 years, have continued the development of what we call the water budget model. And I think one of the slides here will show what we've used in the lake for gauges, what we've put in. This slide goes back to talks about the watershed management plan and its development when it was adopted. And the water budget model specifically addresses goal 12, which you can see right there is it's a management kind of goal with regards to how the water is apportioned to stakeholders. Water is used, for example, for temperature enhancement releases, which is for the trout in the river when the water's let out. It is for releases of the water for whitewater rafting in the Youghiogheny. And then of course, a good amount of the water is used for recreational purposes in the lake itself. All this is spelled out in a water appropriations permit, which is produced by the Maryland Department of the Environment. And I think I'm right in saying that the last iteration of the water appropriations permit was in 2020. And I think it's every 12 or 13 years that a new water appropriations permit is created. One of the portions of the water appropriations permit that we address with the water budget model is that a predictive model is to be used for the purposes of determining who gets what amount of water and when, according to the permit. But it's a management. The idea of the water budget model is it's a model that helps you or helps the dam keeper, in this case Brookfield, apportion the water, and with foreknowledge, in other words, predictability as to how much water is going to be available in the lake. Now, the current model, as presented to Brookfield back in 2018, that model was based upon what we knew and limited amount of data on precipitation and outflow. So we've, as I said before, we've been working for the last 5 years to improve how we can capture data that would be used in a new and better model. Okay. And okay. All right. So to improve the availability, pardon me, of data that an engineering firm could use then to put together an improved water budget model, we had to have means. We had to use tools to actually collect the data. Now, there was already one precipitation gauge in Deep Creek Lake. It is a gauge that is, I think, in the area of North Glade, and it was paid to be installed by DNR. But the lake is large, and when it rains here in Garrett County, everybody realizes it's not even. It doesn't. If it's going to rain an inch and a half, and maybe that's what falls in Friendsville, we aren't necessarily going to have the same amount in Oakland or the same amount in Grantsville. So we needed to spread out the gauges. So we added two more gauges, two more precipitation gauges um, that would collect data that is used for the model. This slide shows you basically what we're talking about, and that is the water in, like precipitation, minus the water out that goes out through the dam, leaks out through the weirs, goes out, is discharged for whitewater rafting or for creation of electricity, means a change in storage in the lake, in the big pool. So this is basically the basic understanding, the basic philosophy of the water budget model. Now, what we tried to do was to get a better idea with the use of gauges and tools of the water in and the water and the outflow. So with the precip gauges, like I said, there are three now. One's in North Glade, I believe one is in Sang Run, and the third one is in Cherry Creek. Now we have three sites that can report data on precipitation that is received in the lake. That's measuring the water coming into the lake. Okay, so this is and we also installed a water level gauge. Now there's a water level gauge that Brookfield is required to have at the dam. It's a workable gauge. There's no problem. But we in the foundation thought it would be good to have a backup so that if anything happened to the gauge in the dam, the Brookfield's gauge, that there would be a backup. And it's recorded, as it says up there, every 15 minutes. It's one's at the dam, and then the other one, the one that we had installed, we the foundation, is in Meadow Mountain Cove. It's on that little bridge that's an extension of State Park Road. Okay. So the outflow then presented us with a different challenge, and a sizable challenge. The outflow below the dam on the Youghiogheny, there is a gauge. There's a flow gauge, and it measures the water that's come out, and it of course is measuring two things, two portions, if you will, if you could break the water down. You've got the flow of the river, which exists whether you've got any water coming out of the dam or not, and then it has on the occasion where water is being released for whatever any number of reasons, as I mentioned earlier, it captures that as well, but it's not differentiating which is which. It's not going to calculate how much water is actually coming out of the lake through the dam. So that was our challenge, and we've ended up just recently, I think it was in the late part of October, maybe the 31st even of October, we had installed at the request, we made the request through DNR and to USGS US Geologic Survey at the same time, to have another flow gauge installed in at the top, what they call the top Yaak, and it's the Yaakagani well before it passes past the dam, the weirs of the dam and the sluices there. So now we're able to, I'm certainly not able, but an engineer is able to determine, based upon the known flow of the river before it comes to the dam, and then you've got the gauge that is collecting the data on the flow, on the outflow of the dam, as well as the flow of the river. Mathematically, that can be determined what the outflow is. So what we succeed in doing with additional precip gauges, a new water levels gauge, and this flow gauge in the Yaakagani is we have added a piece to of knowledge, which is going to take time to continue to develop, because you've got to collect data over a significant period of time so that it's meaningful. But what we've done is we've basically attempted to collect data that will give us an estimate of the groundwater recharge into Deep Creek Lake. That's one thing that we've not had heretofore. The model is going to tell us what the estimated groundwater recharge rate is. Now, I can't sit here today and tell you just how the model works to have that done. What I know, however, is that we are collecting the data from precip gauges, the water level gauge, and the flow gauge. And then there's two other gauges that were already there: a second flow gauge below the dam and the precip gauge in North Glade. With all this data being collected, an engineering firm, and we've selected the engineering firm, they can go ahead now and produce a groundwater recharge estimate that will become part of the existing water budget model. But it will be a tremendous step forward in refinement, and will give us the most important thing for management of the lake levels that could possibly happen. And that is, it gives us greater predictability. We're going to know more about the amount of water that's coming into the lake that heretofore has not been measurable. You know, anecdotally, that the lake always refills from when the level is lowered. Everybody that uses the lake knows that, if you've been around for any length of time. What we don't know is how fast that happens, because we don't have any good data on the groundwater recharge rate. But with all this information and a good engineering firm, we can pull it together and provide the people that are responsible for managing the lake. And that's DNR, that's to some extent MDE and Brookfield Renewable Power. We can provide a model that will assist in greater predictability of how much water is in the pool, how much water is coming up through the ground, and with rainfall data and flow data, we can extend the predictability from maybe 2 or 3 weeks to hopefully the entire season. So what does that do, really? Well, what it does is it gives the manager of the dam a lot more flexibility than he or she has right now. It may give institutions like the Whitewater Rafters, its greater predictability means that the keeper of the dam and the ability for discretionary releases for things like whitewater rafting could come more frequently. It should mean that, you know, the manager of the dam, Brookfield Renewable Power, is able to stay within the rule bands with no problem. And if there's additional valid customer that comes along and has a need, or there's an existing customer with greater needs than what has happened, what the customers had thus far, may be able to be satisfied. But it goes to the goal number 12, and that is the equitable and fair distribution of the asset. And the asset is the water within Deep Creek Lake. And I think that what is going to be available to Brookfield Renewable Power through MDE and with the concurrence of DNR is we're going to have a model that will really increase predictability and captures this, like I said, as I'm thinking of it, the third leg of a stool. And that third leg is the groundwater recharge. You've got the rain coming in, you know what the flow is going out, but we never had an idea as to what the rate was of the water that is coming up through the lake bottom. I'm an old guy, but I wasn't here in 1925. But I'm told that in 1925, when it was time to fill Deep Creek Lake for the first time, 2 years was allowed for that process to unfold. The lake filled up in 6 months. Now there's a clue there, and that clue is there's a lot of water underneath the lake, and it's continuing to bubble up through. So that's what we're trying to get our arms around. That's what we're trying to understand, and we put it in the form of a model that's available to the keeper of the the keeper of the dam, Brookfield Renewable Power, so that they're able to use that to better manage what we have in Deep Creek Lake, and it's equitable for all the stakeholders. So it's good on a recreational level, it's good on an economic level, it's good all the way around when it's all said and done. So that's what we try to do in the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, is we try to tackle projects that will further the implementation of the watershed management plan, and in this case, the focus is on goal number 12. So thank you very much for listening. I think that's it. So have a great day, and I appreciate you listening. And any questions you have, go ahead.
All right. So thank you all for joining us today. I am going to put up one more slide that has my contact information. Again, I appreciate you all taking time to join us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and email them to me, and we'll get them over to the folks at the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, and we will be sure that they get an answer out to you just as soon as they can work with their partners and formulate an answer. All right, so thank you so much. As I dropped into the chat earlier, I will be putting this presentation recording on our Western Cluster of University of Maryland Extension YouTube channel, and I will be able to share that archived presentation with all of you that registered and all of you that joined us today. So be looking for that email in the next week or so. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I thank you for your time today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.